Good morning. Good morning. Um, Today is day 90. We have like 10 more days. Yeah, 10 more days, including this day, more or less, 10, 11. Um, and we are going to, we're kind of wrapping up the theme of worship, and we're going to talk about what happens in his presence. And of course, I can only kind of speak from my experience. I can only speak on based on what I've read as well. And so, what I talk about today is not going to be really, I guess, hard fact rules or written in stone kind of thing. Good morning, Kim. Because this is kind of going to be, this all varies depending on your own individual relationship with God, and it'll vary depending on how God deals with you. So this may not apply to everyone, but yeah, we'll see how this goes. So, what happens in his presence? So, again, I'm slowly kind of wrapping up this whole praise and worship series because tomorrow, I wouldn't say that today is the last day of me talking about worship per se, but tomorrow I am going to talk about worship, but more so as giving as worship, because that is a form of worship, a form of lifestyle. But overall, God doesn't need our praise and worship. He doesn't need our praise and worship to, because usually when people, especially unbelievers, when they hear about praise and worship, they think, well, God needs to hear his affirmation, or God needs to hear this to make him feel better or nothing. No, God doesn't need our praise and worship, and he doesn't need us to say he is worthy to be worthy. You know what I mean? He's not dependent on our praise and worship at all. He is God before us, before we were here. He's God, and he'll be God after we're gone. God is still God. Um, so, telling God that he is great, he is beautiful, he's all powerful, he's mighty, he's a healer, it doesn't make him those things. He's those things regardless. So what happens in his presence? After we use praise to make room for him and to create the environment for God's presence to come, typically that's when worship starts. That's when worship starts. So worship is seeking and praising God until he graces us with his presence. And I think I spoke about this already. Everything's starting to blend in with each other now. But typically in a corporate environment, after after everyone praises, usually, praise is very exuberant. Praise is very celebratory. Everybody is celebrating. Everybody is loud. Everybody's shouting, dancing. Everybody's having a good time. Praise is high in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is very electrifying. Usually, when that praise has completely set the atmosphere in the presence of God to come in, like for real, that's when things usually kind of, how can I say this? It doesn't slow down per se, but that's when things kind of become still. That's when things become quiet. That's when God's presence becomes a little bit more weighty. And if you think about a weight is kind of heavy and kind of pushes down. I guess it pushes down on things a little bit. And so if you think about a weight, you can't really move too much when there's weight on top of you. And I'm not talking about weight as far as something that's very in a negative way, but it's more like how can I describe this? It's kind of like a heavy blanket, if that makes sense. It's really hard to describe these spiritual things in a natural thinking because it sounds weird. But it's kind of like a heavy blanket on you for the most part. It kind of it clothes you, it kind of covers you. And for the most part, you feel very peaceful. You are quiet. You don't want to really make any noise for the most part because during this time, this is when God is dealing with people one-on-one. Although everybody's in the same room, and there could be thousands of people in the room. God at this point, from what I observe, and I could be wrong, if so, somebody correct me, but it could be thousands of people in the room, but at this point, God is dealing with people individually. While he's speaking to somebody about their marriage over here, he's delivering somebody across the room. And at the same time, he's healing somebody emotionally 5 rows from you. And at the same time, he's healing, he's probably, doing something else with somebody 5 rows behind you. He's dealing with everybody individually at this point, at this moment in time. which I think is very neat and amazing. Because the good things about being an usher, while I usher at my church as well. And one of the fascinating things for me being an usher is I can observe everybody in the room and see what's happening, taking place. But I'm a people watcher anyway. So anyway, getting back on hand. At this time, you will hear God. God will start to deal with you. You're really not worried about anyone, anything. You're not really time conscious, because usually at this time, people, they don't want to leave. They don't want to talk. They don't want to do anything. They just really want to just bask and sit in His presence. You have no ulterior motives. Nothing else is on your mind. It is pure worship. And at this time, you'll notice that some people will weep. Some people will be face down on their face, laying prostrate. Some people will be kneeling. Some people will be walking around. Because again, God is dealing with people individually, yet corporately at the same time. And basically at this time, you are loving on Him while He's loving right back on you. So it's kind of like a cycle of love at this point. And so remember, although I'm talking about this in a corporate setting, this is not really restricted to church, because you can have this one-on-one anytime, anywhere with God. God does not withhold His presence. He doesn't want to withhold His presence. So He is willing to come to you and to be intimate with you and to interact with you, but you have to make room for Him to come, and you can do that with praise. Now, if it gets to a point, now I know that there are some, and this happens to me a lot, and it used to get me really frustrated, but there will be times, if there are times to where you are at home by yourself and you set aside time for God and you're praising and you're worshiping and you don't feel God's presence, or you think you don't feel God's presence, here's one thing that I have learned: don't always depend on a feeling, physically speaking, because that will trip you up. That will trip you up a whole lot, and especially not only by yourself too, but also in church settings. You may not always feel things all the time, but that doesn't mean that God is not with you. That doesn't mean that God is not near you. That doesn't mean that God is not working on you. So don't always depend on a feeling to help you determine whether God is with you or not. And also, too, I feel led to say this: don't always depend on, let's say, for instance, again, that the Spirit is high in the place and your pastor is prophesying to people or stuff is happening to people, but you're just standing there like, why is God skipping over me? Why nothing's happening to me? I'm expecting like everybody else. I'm expecting like the next person. I'm expecting a word from God, but nothing's happening to me. Don't be discouraged by that. For one, the enemy will use that to trip you up real bad. Again, all I can say is that, especially if you've been seeking for something for a long time, God knows that if you just continue to persevere and continue to seek God, God will meet your need. God will meet you right where you are. But again, my whole point is, don't be so dependent on feelings. Don't be so dependent on what's happening to everybody else. And basically, don't compare yourself to other people when God's presence is high, because that'll trip you up real bad. It used to get me really bad. I got to a point to where just basically it all comes down to your trust in God for the most part. So do not depend on feelings to determine whether God is with you or not, or whether God is in the presence or not. So that is all that I have today. I pretty much want to kind of wrap up praise and worship. Tomorrow I am going to conclude worship with giving. I'm going to talk a little bit more on giving, why giving is important, and how giving is a form of worship and a form of lifestyle. And that is it. And then Saturday, we'll talk about our last week, which is personal devotion. I'm going to pray and try my hardest to actually think of action items. I'm kind of disappointed that I was not able to give you guys as much action items as much, but I'm really going to pray really hard all week next week to give you guys some. And that's going to be during our personal devotion week. And then we have like 2 random days left, and I'm going to use those as conclusion days. And then we're done with these 100 days. So I'm really, really happy. Also, I'll probably announce this later. I'll probably announce this on the last day as far as what's next after 100 days. Because last night and I'm done for the most part with the lessons, kind of rambling a little bit. But last night during corporate prayer, I taught for the past 2-3 weeks, for the most part, I taught on the Holy Spirit in corporate prayer, and our church is also going through a gift of the Spirit series. So I kind of taught on the Holy Spirit in connection to prayer a little bit, and also the gifts of the Spirit. And last night I had the group do prophetic activations. And that was really interesting for some of them because that was their first time. And I don't know what it is, but it gives me like pure joy to help people kind of, per se, kind of help people to be activated in their gifts. So I'm thinking about maybe doing an online version of that. I don't know how yet because that's going to be really challenging. So we'll see. And I'm talking about this in 2018, like way into 2018. So I really don't know how to go about that yet. We'll see. We'll see. But that is it. Yeah, a lot of people, that was their first time prophesying, and they were kind of shocked because for the most part, they realized they've always been doing it. They didn't think it was prophesying for the most part. They didn't think it was the edifying and the comforting and the exhortation part of prophecy. They just thought that it was a thought that popped into their mind. And it's amazing to also see people realize for the first time that all this time God's been speaking to them. They just didn't know that it was him. So it was a nice confident booster for some of these people. But anywho, I am rambling and I got to go. Again, tomorrow I'm going to finish out the worship series with giving. We're going to do personal devotion for the next week. I'm going to try my hardest to think and pray about action items. And then the last 2 days, day 99, I'm going to talk about the spiritual warfare, the attacks that will come with your relationship with God, because again, the enemy wants to keep you and God separated. And then day 100, I'm going to pretty much talk about all of this being a lifestyle. We'll see how that one goes. And then I'll talk about what's next after 100 days for those of you guys who want to keep rolling with me. So that is it. I will see you guys tomorrow at 7 a.m. Enjoy your Thursday.